I started to look for ways to use medicine to spend time in mountainous areas.
Paging Dr. Cook. Paging Dr. Cook. Dr. Cook, you're wanted in the OR. Dr. Cook, you're wanted in the OR. Welcome to the Prescription for Success podcast with your host, Dr. Randy Cook.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Prescription for Success. I'm Dr. Randy Cook, your host for the podcast, which is a production of MD Coaches, providing leadership and executive coaching for physicians by physicians to overcome burnout, transition your career, develop as a leader, or whatever your goal might be. Visit MD Coaches on the web at mymdcoaches.com because you're not in this alone. My guest today is an experienced rock climber, an outstanding nature and wildlife photographer, and, oh yes, he's also a physician. So let's hear the story of how Dr. Andrew Peacock does all those things and does them very well. I'm really excited to be talking to Dr. Andrew Peacock today, who, although he is a native of Adelaide, South Australia, talking to us from Southern California today. Is that right, Andrew?
That's right. I'm in sunny California in Santa Barbara.
Well, I bet you're enjoying your stay. That is a very nice part of the world where you have some previous experience. We'll probably talk about that as well. Let's get right down to business. We're here to talk about your journey to and through medicine and some things that came along after. Let's actually start at the beginning. When I read your bio, it sounded to me as if early in your life, you didn't really feel like you had any particular direction. It was sort of a life of leisure, but at some point you decided to go to medical school. How did that come about?
I did, have a very fortunate upbringing in Adelaide in South Australia, and the focus for me, let's say, during high school years was very much around sporting activities and sporting achievements, primarily in the pool or in the ocean. And, I was a pretty good student at high school. I was interested in biology. I was interested in the human body and how it performed, because I guess that's sort of what I was doing was, trying to perform. My father was a thoracic surgeon, not a cardiothoracic surgeon, just thoracic work. My mum was a nurse, but she gave that up by the time she had 3 boys.
So you actually did have some medical influencers around you.
Oh, very much so.
I see.
I remember taking the phone call for Dad. He'd be on call through his work at the hospital, which was literally just down the hill from where we were living. Maybe for whatever reason he couldn't get to the phone, or maybe I was looking for a call from my girlfriend, so I'd hit the phone before he would. And I'd pick up the call from the nurse at the ward, and she wanted to speak to him, and half the time she thought it was him, and so I'd be hearing about the latest, atrial fibrillation issue post-surgery kind of thing before he heard about it. The temptation, of course, was to lead her on. And it was usually a woman, not always, but usually. Sure. The temptation was to lead her on a bit longer, but I would usually go and find him to deal with whatever was actually happening with one of his patients.
Yeah. And how about your siblings? Did they have any interest in medicine at all?
Yeah, so 2 younger brothers. My middle brother, Tim, is a general practitioner or a family physician in Australia, concentrating primarily on skin work. And my youngest brother was much smarter than the 2 of us. He went on to become a physical education teacher at sort of high school and college level in
that
Australia.
Is smart.
Yeah,
that is smart.
Yeah, exactly.
So when did you make that decision that it was going to be a medical career for you?
Look, I don't really think I ever had a great sense of the concept of a career. It was more just that these were the things I was interested in. Getting high marks to get into university wasn't an issue for me. I was exposed to medicine, and I kind of joke a little bit that if there had been a career counsellor at my high school, which there wasn't, but if there had been, and if they'd come to me and said, well, look, what about architecture? I would have said, what's that? I was pretty naive to the world of other career options, I think. So it was pretty straightforward to, log into medical school and ride my bike down the hill and turn up to lectures and be interested in what I was learning, which I was. It was good.
It's very convenient.
It was.
So and so you mentioned that you found that course of study very interesting and felt pretty sure that was what your future was going to look like. Is that the way it was at that point?
Well, again, no. I mean, to put this into some context, I was 16 years old when I started medical school.
Wow. That's different.
It is different. I was a year ahead at high school because we had traveled overseas when I was younger, and kind of that altered my, the continuity of my high school education. Anyway, so I was a year ahead, and in those days in Australia at the university I went to, there was no kind of, 3-year college course or anything prior to medical school. So, yeah, I did my first year of medical school. I was 16 when I turned up to my first lecture. And again, the concept of a career didn't come to me as a 16-year-old. It was like, well, I've been studying at high school, now I'm going to study at university, whatever. It's all fine. I then took a year off. After my first year, I took a year off to go to Europe and compete for Australia in the Junior Kayaking World Championships, which I had been training for, and I was lucky enough to make the Australian team. So I took a year off, and after the championships, I shouldered an army surplus duffel bag and made my way around Europe at the age of 17, backpacking and kind of hanging out in youth hostels, and came back to Australia, did a bit of other work, and then recommenced medical studies. But I was probably more interested I was equally as interested in playing Australian rules football at that time, and unfortunately suffered a pretty major knee injury while playing a pre-season game. And perhaps only then, once a bit of travel, a bit of paddling had been put aside, my football career was suddenly ended. Mm-hmm. Did medicine take on a bit more of a focus, along the lines of, okay, well, I need to get this done and sorted, and then work out what post-medical school looks like.
Let me ask you, if you think, suppose your situation had been different, and suppose you didn't have to, suppose you were not in a position to make a decision about medical school until you were in your early 20s, as opposed to when you were 16. Do you think things would have changed at all? I'm just curious.
Yeah, I think the answer to that has to be yes, but I can't give you an answer in which direction. I would have, at the age of 16, you don't get exposed to many other things other than those in your immediate sphere of living, and that was medicine. There's no other way to put that, really. Mm-hmm. There weren't any other areas of study that had grabbed me. People. One of my good buddies went to do engineering, and I mean, that was like, I had no idea what engineering was about. I still don't have any idea what studying engineering would be all about. But anyway, the point was that I didn't really have any other interests. It was easy enough to go to medical school, and that's what I did. And and I don't speak about that with the idea that, I wish I hadn't done it at all.
Sure, I understand.
Yeah.
And did you find medical school to be particularly challenging, or was there a complete lack of pressure? What was the experience like for you at that time?
I mean, it's a good question. I had a really good cohort of other students to work with and learn from, and I went to a medical school where we were on the wards early. So I think the biggest challenge perhaps wasn't so much the hours of learning as it was understanding how to be a good doctor and communicate with patients and start learning how to listen to patients, because really they're the main things, I think. And, I don't think I mastered that to any degree as a medical student, of course. But, I think the challenges were perhaps being on the ward and understanding how to, be part of that team and contribute and learn how to get those skills. So I think they were the challenges for me, much more so than, learning anatomy or physiology or whatever.
And as you approached the end of your more formal education, and it was time to think about postgraduate training, what was in your head at that time? I know you made a decision to come to this country, but I'm really interested in how that came about and what was in your head.
Yeah, sure. So in our last year of studies, we had the opportunity to spend some time wherever we wanted doing an elective. I think perhaps the term here might be externship, at least that's what I recall. But in other words, I guess a kind of a more unstructured period of that last year of medical school, but we had to set some sort of learning agenda. I was interested in exercise physiology, and I was interested in surgery and sports medicine. They were the kind of things, I guess, that, informed what I chose to do. A couple of things happened. I had not long before run into an American, Lester Machado is his name. He lives in San Diego now. At the time, he had already graduated as a dentist. He was interested in maxillofacial surgery, and he was spending time in Adelaide because we had a very well-known maxillofacial surgery practice. He was into training in the gym as I was, and we ran into each other in the gym and became friends. And he subsequently came back to the States to complete medical school and ended up at Santa Barbara Cottage Hospital doing some work to kind of finalize his medical training before becoming a maxillofacial surgeon, I guess. I may be missing some of the exact details of that now or these years later. To cut a long story short, because of that connection, I ended up coming to Santa Barbara to do a 3-week elective in general surgery. And the head of, and obviously, was introduced to California in that way and really enjoyed the 3 weeks. And was fortunate that the head surgeon, the chief of surgery, at the end of those 3 weeks said to me that if I wanted to come back and do a residency program here, that he would hold a position outside of the match for me.
That's quite an offer.
Yeah, exactly. And one that I wasn't going to refuse without knowing at all that I wanted to become a surgeon, really. I mean, but it's an offer that, there's no question that felt very generous, would enable me to return to somewhere that I had enjoyed being. The other significant thing that happened in that last year of medical school was that I also spent a few weeks with the orthopedic surgeons, with a group of orthopedic surgeons in San Francisco because of my interest in sports medicine. They were doing some of the, I guess, relatively early work in terms of knee arthroscopies. But they also happened to look after the San Francisco Ballet. And as a result of that, it was arranged for me to spend an afternoon watching rehearsals for the ballet. And that's where I met my future wife, who was a principal ballerina.
How convenient.
How convenient. She was a principal ballerina at San Francisco Ballet at the time. And we met at the rehearsal and had a chat. And it's a long story, but that was the beginning of the long story. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
So that was my connection to California. And so perhaps we can say there were two reasons for coming back to Santa Barbara. One was to, spend some time with her, but also I took up the offer to come and do a year of general surgery. So I completed medical school. I did my internship in Sydney. And at the end of that year, I think I did another half a year of work as a resident at one of the hospitals in Sydney, and then came to Santa Barbara to do a year of general surgery training at Cottage Hospital. And it was a pretty small group of surgical residents, but a really fun group. And I had a really amazing year, really interesting, good fun, lots of time in the OR.
Uh, so at that point, I mean, it sounds like you were having a really good experience there. But at some point, um, the decision came, and I don't know if we're even close to that point in the story, but at some point, there was a decision that you weren't really interested in completing a surgery residency and becoming board certified and all that kind of stuff. Something else happened. Am I right about that, or am I reading the bio wrong?
No, it's a little bit hard to think back to exactly towards the end of that year meant that I wasn't convinced that I wanted to sign up for, another 4 or 5 years of surgical training. I think some of it was that I think I had a sense that I was learning to become a good doctor, whatever that really means. But I don't think I had a sense that I was able to be or was going to be a good surgeon. And there are differences there in terms of the dexterity and skills required to complete surgery. I think that's the kind of thoughts that I had, but there maybe have been some other influences. Maybe also I just wasn't really interested in spending all of my time within the 4 walls of a hospital, as interesting as that year had been. And so I didn't sign up to continue on. But then I guess sort of the death knell for a traditional career in medicine came when I signed up right at the end of that year for a rock climbing course at UCSB. And, I sort of flippantly tell the story that was the end of my medical career, because I suddenly developed a passion for rock climbing and now had a purpose to sort of wander the Sierra Mountains of California and elsewhere.
Yeah.
And, spend my time outdoors, climbing, learning new skills, becoming confident in the outdoors. And that's what I did for the next 6 months. I didn't work. I just roamed around the Western US rock climbing.
What was it that drew you back to the mountains?
This was just a whole new world for me. I didn't grow up in the mountains. I grew up in fairly flat South Australia. My physical endeavors were always related to water. I didn't even own a backpack at the time. And suddenly here was this activity that was requiring all of my mental output in terms of being safe and working out how you go about, doing long rock climbs in the Sierras and relying on another person on the other end of your rope. And at the same time, it was an incredibly rewarding physical endeavor that wasn't about competing with other people, which is what, all of my sport had been about up until that time. So luckily there were a couple of other guys that I met who I went off on road trips with, and I don't know, just became an all-encompassing thing that gave me the reason to travel to areas that I could get to high points and learn about the world around me in a different way. I think that's probably the best way to put it.
Have you ever had a moment in your life that altered your future?
To see that we have this bottleneck with residency, that so many people don't get that chance to get that so needed training.
Have you ever wondered why you chose the direction you went?
When I had left my prior position, I didn't plan on going back to practicing medicine.
Coming this month, it's Life-Changing Moments, hosted by Dr. Dale Waxman.
The parts of your job that are professionally fulfilling, can you say a little bit more about that?
In this companion show to Prescription for Success, we will explore those decision points with our former guests and provide you with the wisdom and insight to make those choices for yourself.
What can I do for the country other than the psychosocial assistance?
Getting the new show is easy. If you are already subscribed to RX for Success, you'll get it automatically. But if you are not subscribed, now is a great time to do so. You can find the RX for Success podcast on Apple, Spotify, Amazon, or wherever you listen to podcasts.
We'll get back to our interview in just a moment, but right now, I want to tell you about a new sponsor for us. Growing Innovation Health Solutions is a comprehensive medical billing service that allows you to shift the burden of collections off your shoulders so you can focus on patient care. GI Health Solutions has the experience and the expertise to help you manage all your billing-related chores efficiently and professionally. Their expert team will handle all your coding, claim follow-up, and billing issues to be certain you receive your payments on time. They can streamline your billing process and increase your revenue by up to 30%. With GI Health Solutions, you'll get more time with patients, less busy work, better cash flow, fewer errors, and improved patient satisfaction. So reach out to Growing Innovation Health Solutions today and let them help your medical group improve profitability and eliminate administrative burdens. Visit their website at www.gihealthsolutions.net for a free consultation. And now let's get back to our interview. How did you make that segue from what had been entirely focused on a highly specific, highly skillful area of discipline into something that was entirely different, and yet you found ways to make good use of your medical training as well, if I'm reading it right. But please tell the story.
I had another 6 or 7 months in the US, and I can't remember if my visa had expired or I probably just needed some money. So I didn't really have an avenue with which to work in the US any further, and I went back to Australia and found a whole new community of people with whom we had a lot in common, because all we wanted to do was go rock climbing in the Blue Mountains outside of Sydney on the weekends. It was easy for me to pick up locum family practice or emergency department work in various parts of New South Wales in Australia. I'd be driving out from Sydney on a Friday morning, picking up a shift at noon, working till midnight, getting up at 6 a.m., working 7 to midnight the next day. In terms of making a bit of money, that was a good way to do things. It was also an incredibly good way to learn a lot, and to learn where your boundaries laid in terms of what I could cope with and what I couldn't, as long as I had other seniors around me. And so it was just a good grounding for becoming a very generalist doctor, dealing with family practice type issues, but also emergency department issues.
Right.
And then that gave me the money to travel and take up a week or 2 weeks off and go rock climbing and that kind of thing. And then you mentioned photography, because it's certainly significant to my life at the moment. I had been interested in photography at high school, doing darkroom at high school, that kind of thing. Medical school pretty much shut me down from a creative avenue perspective. But then once I started climbing and spending more time in the outdoors, I started to sort of document that photographically, and started getting particularly excited once I started shooting slide film or transparency film, and getting back images that I could look at on a light table that sort of colourful and jumped out at me and told a bit of a story perhaps of what I was out there for in terms of enjoying the outdoors. And moving on just a little bit with that as an idea, I started to look for ways to use medicine to spend time in mountainous areas. I mean, we can talk about rock climbing. Rock climbing doesn't have to be in the mountains, but it's not an unusual progression to move from the local crags of a town to the big mountains of the Himalayas, for instance, for those of so I was able to work to secure a voluntary position, first of all in India, in northern India, in Himachal Pradesh. I spent, I think it was 4 months, it may have been 5 months, working for the Tibetan government in exile in Dharamsala, where there was a Western style hospital where we had wards full of patients with tuberculosis. We had people with tropical illnesses. We had an O&G department. I mean, when I say department, wow. I mean that's overstating things enormously.
I understand, but that's really quite a That's quite a medical education.
Yeah, absolutely it was. We had voluntary doctors from, I worked with doctors from Scotland, Germany, Spain, and then also that we had a couple of Tibetan doctors who were training, or medical students, I guess, perhaps, that were training, or junior doctors. So, the idea was to eventually bring this hospital up to a situation where it was Tibetans running it, Tibetans working in it, and that is how it is today. But back then, it was a place where, having Western volunteers made the whole thing work. So that was incredible. And then from there, I went to Nepal, where I volunteered with the Himalayan Rescue Association, which still has volunteers travelling there twice a year today, and staffs a couple of clinics in the mountains, one in the Annapurna region, one in the Everest region, primarily tasked with educating and helping trekkers who run into issues with altitude illness. So one of my roles was to give a daily talk on altitude illness prevention to the large numbers of hikers coming through the town that I was in. I was based in Manang in the Annapurna region, and obviously treatment of altitude illnesses, but also significantly, particularly in Manang, we were the only source of medical help for the local villages. So, again, we had pregnant women. I had to take teeth out. I spent, I think, 2 hours with the dentist at the American Embassy in Kathmandu, who taught me how to do a dental block and remove teeth. And then it was kind of like, all right, you're on your own. Off you go.
So it sounds like everywhere you went, you seem to have discovered a need for any medical care, learned a bit along the way, and made yourself very useful. That had to be very rewarding for you.
Yeah, it definitely was. I've always said that one of the great things about medicine for me has always been that wherever it is that I'm turning up to work, there's no role for me other than just to help people out during the day. I'm not trying to sell anything. Do you know what I mean? I'm not really working for anyone else, really. I'm working, but it's not like I'm not having to particularly represent anyone other than myself. I'm getting paid. Yeah, that's great. Usually, if it's not a voluntary thing. But at the end of the day, you really just had to solve problems and help that person or people who are in front of you. And that's always just felt really rewarding.
Are you aware of how incredibly idyllic that sounds, particularly to, I would imagine, virtually all physicians in the Western world, that you're able to deliver whatever care is needed, but you're beyond the reach of any department head, any bureaucrat, any government regulation, any constraints to what you do, other than you're there to deliver care. Does that realization come your way at all? I find it very compelling, frankly.
Yeah, look, it's an interesting one, Randy, because at the time, no. At the time it was just what I did. But interestingly, it has exactly the statement you made has informed the way I've tried to practice medicine ever since. I don't sign contracts. I don't I don't have people telling me what to do. And by that, I do not mean that I consider myself some sort of, Lone Ranger who knows everything in medicine. That's not at all. It's not at all what I'm saying. I very much appreciate having people around me who know more than I do and to whom I can turn to help for if I've got problems with if I've got an issue that I can't quite sort out myself. But no, I've always flown so far under the radar in Australia, for instance, by not becoming a specialist. Not deliberately necessarily, but I guess bit by bit it just became obvious to me that I graduated at a time where I was given certain medical billing privileges. It's a bit hard. It's not worth going through the explanation for that. But my point is that I graduated long enough ago that by not specializing, I've been able to continue to work in most environments, getting a reasonable wage, not as much as if I was a specialist, and being able to contribute and help, and then walk away and not really have any oversight. Oversight I'll tell you where the oversight comes from when you turn up to work. It's from the nurses. If the nurses think you don't know what you're doing, you'll be out of there quick smart. So,
Absolutely.
there's oversight clinically. I
Yeah.
guess I'm talking about bureaucratic oversight, which I can't stand.
Yeah, and I certainly didn't in any way intend to make you sound like some out of control guy who's not paying attention to results or anything of that nature. And you put you illuminated a very important point, and that nobody, for the most part, practices medicine alone. It is a team effort, and if you pay attention to the reactions and the advice from people around you, I think it certainly makes you a better practitioner. And it sounds like that was your experience as well.
Yeah, very much so. And I think all along I've just tried to pay attention to the idea, at least for me, is that so much of the medical practice I've been involved with is very much about learning how to listen to patients and then in turn communicate with them with the idea that a lot of it for the work that I've done anyway has just been about, of course, some treatment dilemmas perhaps, but a lot of it's about problem solving and getting someone perhaps to the right person who's beyond my skill level to get them sorted out properly, which in my experience often doesn't happen very well sometimes.
Well, again, that really kind of sounds like a medical dream come true for me, and kudos to you for taking advantage of it. I do want to make sure we have plenty of time. I want to sort of segue into the subject of your photographic work, which is quite spectacular, I might add. We're going to put information in the show notes about where people can find your work. But it really is remarkably artistic. It is significantly different, I think, from what most people think of when they think of nature photography and wildlife photography, in that it is so artistic. And I would like for you to talk to us a little bit about how that evolved, how it became a really big part of your life in addition to your medical life.
So if we just step back to the time that I spent in India and Nepal, when I went on those voluntary jobs, I took with me 50 rolls of slide film. I'm pretty sure it was Kodak, actually, although I preferred to shoot with Fuji Velvia at the time.
Was this actually prior to the availability of digital photography?
Oh, yeah. This was 1996.
Right. And what a great medium that was, the transparency film. Mm-hmm. Go ahead. I'm not going to take over this conversation, I assure you.
No, that's okay. No, I was just going to say I got my first digital camera in 2005, so this was 9 years prior to that. And I came back with, what I thought was going to be 50 rolls of, really amazing photography. And of course it wasn't at all. But that's, telling the story of my voluntary work in the subcontinent. But I had just enough reasonable photos that Lonely Planet Images took me on as a stock contributor at the time. So that was kind of significant in that it gave it. I guess it.
That's a great deal.
I can photograph. And it gave me a purpose for future photography in the sense that the idea of photographing and just leaving slides sitting in a sleeve in a folder at home made no sense to me. It was like, I enjoyed the process for sure, but I liked seeing images out there in the world. So the Lonely Planet Stock Library gave me an opportunity to do that, and I guess encouraged me. And then I started photographing climbing and got some stuff published in climbing magazines, and it just became very much a passion, very much about learning and getting better, reading about other photographers, being inspired by photographers like Galen Rowell, who is an amazing rock climbing, outdoors and nature photographer who wrote a lot, really giving you an insight into his thoughts and into the world of light and the way that he looked at light and photographed it. So, with all that sort of inspiration and I guess creative output driving me, it just became more and more of an area that I wanted to pursue. And when digital photography came around, as it has done for many, many people, I'm not alone in this at all, but it certainly just freed me up to be more creative. When I was shooting transparency film, it was like I used to think, well, I'm only going to press the shutter button if it's the photo,
Right.
which it never was. It never was, but all
Mhm.
it did was tie me up in knots, thinking that, or not enabling me to be creative, and obviously digital changes that paradigm completely. I became a better photographer, but then again, so did lots and lots of other people, and suddenly you've got a massive pool of photographers. And I've often thought, God, of all the things I could have picked creatively, it turned out to be the one that that is now just ubiquitous.
Sure.
And I mean, it's kind of crazy, really, the idea that we have to document and
Well,
photograph every single little thing.
the capability, the equipment is unquestionably ubiquitous, but the artistic capability is certainly not. And I think that's where you truly distance yourself
Right.
from the rest of the pack. When did you become aware that you were doing something that people would search out and pay money for?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, it's definitely pleasing to hear you talk about the art side of things, because I think for me that is, in the end, I think particularly these days, I think documentary photography will always have its place, and I wish it was something I could do so much better. But irregardless, then I think for me, the more artistic side of photography is what interests me. So when I'm in places like Antarctica, of course you can document the place, that's true, but I guess I'm looking for ways to make some sort of more creative or artistic interpretation of what I'm seeing, and it's not always possible to do that in certain situations, but hopefully I get there bit by bit. And I'm not too sure that I've ever become particularly aware that people are searching out my stuff over other work, because there is still a lot of really good creative artistic work out there. But the thing about photography for me is that there's never an end point. There's never a best photo. There's never a best photographer. Those things just don't exist. It's not an objective art form. It's still subjective, other than documentary to some degree. And so there's just always that search, for that next amazing light or a moment. So it keeps you going, that's for sure. It keeps you interested, and I've been lucky to now be involved in a travel industry based on ships for a company called Lindblad Expeditions. I work as a photo instructor, and that enables me to again be part of a team, work in amazing environments like Antarctica or the Arctic, and also now I'm doing some work for them as an expedition leader. So just again, sort of a progression of interesting things along the way that keep me excited about all kinds of work.
Can you think of a moment or a period of time when you became aware that you were more artistic than documentary?
Yeah, I'm not too sure that I know the answer to that. If I reflected on it a bit longer, I might. I think, perhaps, I'm not sure it's the correct analogy, but in the same way that I bore myself to tears if I try and write a journal, I think it's possible I would bore myself if I just was wanting to document everything, or not everything, but it just doesn't lend itself to me somehow. So, and I think the black and white photography that I used to always be interested in or inspired by when I was younger was very much of an artistic type, I guess, an artistic genre. And so I think it's just always, that's just drawn me to shoot in that way, or to look at scenes in that way, and to be a bit more less literal, more abstract, perhaps. I
want to make the statement for our audience that I think you undersell yourself a bit. Obviously there are images far too numerous to count, because, as you say, the medium is available to just about anybody. But truly, the images that you create, Andrew, are in a class that a lot of most photographers, I think, are simply never going to be able to achieve. And I think you're to be congratulated for that. little bit later, I'm going to ask you to let our audience know where they can find your work online, because there's a lot of it out there, and it truly is intriguing. But at this point, what I'd really like to do is what we came here for, and that is hear you give us a little wisdom of your own, and I'll stay out of the way. So I'm going to close my mic, and listeners, Dr. Andrew Peacock is going to give us his personal prescriptions for success.
Well, I think in giving my view of points towards success, I think I want to be careful to say that I don't feel that every aspect of my life is based around the idea that I've been completely successful. So I couch my response with that in mind. The first thing I would say is not to follow the crowd. It helped me to form individual ideas about what might be more interesting for me to pursue, and I think that that's part and parcel of the idea of not following along with what everyone thinks is the norm. For instance, as you finish medical school, my idea was that I would be open to try anything that sounded interesting. And if I reflect back on what my path in medicine has been, then that's really has opened up doors for pursuing new things that have been really rewarding. I also think, secondly, to focus on the things you can control. If you try to exert energy or put energy into things that are out of your ability to control, then you can waste a lot of energy and time on that. So I tend to let go things that I can't control and focus on managing those that I can. And thirdly, travel. It's the only way to really appreciate what we have on this planet. And from that experience, you can learn a lot about oneself and about a way of living and approaching things. So they're the three things I think I would mention in regards to this question.
Well, you've given us a lot of wisdom. Very hard to beat, I think. Don't follow the crowd. Focus on things you can control and see as much of the world as you can. That's a great recipe, Andrew, and I really appreciate you being here to share that with us, as well as filling us in on how you got to where you are. It's been a great conversation. Before we go, I want to give you an opportunity to let our audience know where they can find you, find more about you, and get a look at some of these spectacular images that you create. You want to share that with us?
Sure, yeah. My website address is footloosphotography.com, and that's photography with an F, so footloosphotography.com. Yes, I am on Instagram, but I stopped posting on Instagram quite some time ago. It's really a dead-end creative endeavor there. But you can still find my work there, again, just at the handle Footloose Photography. I still post stories on Instagram because it's fun, but I don't tend to post images. And that's about it, really, in terms of my online presence at the moment for photography. My website has links to a print store. And any of the images there, I'm very happy to arrange for them to be in the print store so people can order from anywhere around the world.
Dr. Andrew Peacock, it has been a real pleasure speaking with you. Thank you so much for being here.
Oh, it's been my pleasure, Randy. Thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us today. You can really help us with a 5-star rating. That'll give our podcast much more visibility, and that helps us reach many more listeners. Exclusive content is available on our Patreon page, including membership-only material like personal rapid-fire Q&A sessions with our guests. To be sure you never miss an episode, visit our website at rxforsuccesspodcast.com to subscribe. And while you're there, learn how to get CME credit from CMify just by listening. Special thanks to Ryan Jones, who created and performs our theme music. Also to Craig Clausen of Clausen Solutions Group, who edits the show. And remember, be sure to fill your prescription for success with my next episode.